Welcome to another episode of an unexpected podcast. Here we have myself currently in Honduras, Matt in Boston, and Evan as well in Boston, soon to be Ireland this fall to challenge all the Sons of Erin to Middle Earth strategy battle game. So for today's episode, we're going to go over our top three factions. Now, before we begin, we're going to say that these are all subjective to our personal playstyle and involvement in the hobby. As always, before we talk about our core subject, we are going to go into a list review from a community member. So Matt, if you could put that up.
All righty. And there we go.
All right. Today we have Joseph Tyler. He submitted a 700 points double list. He says this would be me and my doubles partner's first tournament, and we were looking for some advice on how to make our list. So right off the bat, good for you for bringing a themed. Well, actually, we didn't go through a list yet. Sorry, we pre-read this. The tournament stipulations are that there are a max model count of 40 models, and legendary legions are allowed. And their list is a 700 point Defenders of Helm's Deep. So good for you guys for bringing a cool themed list for your first thing. I think the Battle of Helm's Deep is amazing because, as we'll probably see, you'll get different races from Tolkien's lore fighting in different war bands and different players. So player one has 350 points. Theoden with shield and heavy armor, 8 Royal Guard, 7 with throwing spear, 3 Rohan warriors with shield and spear, and in the second warbed you have Haldir with heavy armor and bow, 4 Gladrim warriors with bow and spear, and 1 with a bow. Okay. Player 2 is going to come in with Aragorn, and this is Aragorn, and he has 1 Rohan Royal Guard with banner, 5 Rohan warriors with shield and spear, 3 Rohan warrior with shield, and 5 Gladrim with spear and shield, as well as Helith, son of Hama. So I introduced it, but Matt and Evan probably have way more experience with this, so I'll probably throw this to them because I do know that I believe one or both of you guys have actually played this at a tournament. One thing, though, quickly looking that does stick out is you don't have gambling with his banner to get all those might points. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'll throw it to you guys to kind of figure that out.
So, Ev, you want to start or you want me to start?
I'll start off. I have some preliminary thoughts here. Yeah, I think you don't necessarily need gambling if you're also taking Aragorn. I think having access to his free might is fine. I do question the warrior configurations, however. It looks, just from glancing at this, that they don't have their bow limit max for each faction. For player one, it seems like they have they could maybe do with like 1 more bow. And then player two, it looks like instead of taking Galadrim with spears and bows, they've taken spears and shields. So I would recommend swapping those Galadrim with spears and shields for spears and bows, and then finding some points somewhere. That shouldn't be very hard to maybe drop some throwing spears or drop a warrior or something like that to make up the points. I also find it interesting that they have decided to take so many Royal Guard with Theoden and Haldir's contingent, because I feel like a lot of the benefit of the Royal Guard is that increased fight value. And I'm not sure that's going to be super useful when you have so many Galadrim with bows and spears to give you that fight 5 anyways. Same deal with Halith. I wonder if maybe dropping him down to like Aldor or something like that and getting an extra guy in Aragorn's warband
Take
might be a
Halith.
better option.
You always, whenever you have Aragorn in this list, you take Halith.
Maybe.
You want
I'm
to
still
fight
not
7
sure.
Aragorn.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, honestly, I don't really know about Aragorn at this points level, to be honest. I wonder if you in player two's contingent, if you split him up into like maybe a Legolas and Gimli or something like that instead. Um and then draw Paleth altogether. There's a lot of different ways you could go with this, but what I'm definitely not sure about is the Royal Guard en masse like that.
Now the Royal Guard, the spear they can't support in this legion. They can only throw, correct?
No,
They
they can
can. They
support.
can.
They
Oh,
can
they
support.
can support.
Yep.
Okay, so I do see what you're talking about, Evan, with the configuration, because I see Aragorn's warband with just pure spears almost with both Galadrim and Royal Guard, and I feel like having seen some of the doubles scenarios, your warbands are going to be kind of split up. So like
Yeah.
you're not going to really see both players deploy in the same area. So it doesn't quite make sense, which I see Evan, to have all your like I guess eggs in one basket or in two baskets, but the two
Yeah.
baskets might not actually.
So that's kind of the core about the advice that I'm going to give here, because I assume this double tournament is going to be using the doubles list out of the match play guide. And there's only one of those 6 scenarios in which the two lists, the two players end up deploying together. In every other scenario, they deploy separately and they have to come together in order to win the game, or at least to win the game effectively. So in doubles as opposed to in singles, it makes tremendous amounts of sense to have ways to speed up either army if you need to, because the way you kind of roll the dice at the beginning to see who's the lead player and who's the secondary player, although it may be in this one that you know who the lead player is going to be, because I think in Legendary Legions, hang on a
So
second.
Theoden should be the one deploying in the center.
Yeah, Theoden's always the one who's deploying in the center. All right, so
Or the first army, basically.
yeah, all right. So this is somewhat less of an issue for this, but I think I would still want an ability to march with Theoden's contingent to help draw these two together, because there are a couple scenarios where you deploy on either side and you have to kind of march toward each other. And I think I would definitely, to make this happen, replace Haldir with Gamling. Because there's nothing that requires in these war bands Haldir to lead elves and Theoden to lead Rohan. You can have both lead both, or Gamling lead elves. And I think that's what you want to do. And that's part of what you guys were saying is, I mean, ideally what you want is kind of Rohan backed by elves.
And by Gamling leading, you mean, for clarification, so he knows, you switch the banner, give Gamling the banner, and take away the banner from the Royal Guard, correct?
Right. So two things are going to happen here. Haldir is going to disappear from this list. Gamling with Royal Banner is going to go in. And then the banner is going to disappear from Aragorn's warband. And that's actually going to give you, I think, like a net 5 points extra that you can spend in some various places. But you are going to have to kind of rebalance the numbers a bit to keep both sides at 350 points. So Theoden's warband, player one's contingent here is going to have to get cheaper, and Aragorn's contingent is going to have to get more expensive. And there's a couple of different ways to do this. One is, I think you take some of the expensive Royal Guard figures out of Theoden's warband and you put them in Aragorn's warband and just replace them with Rohan warriors. And then you are going to take some of those 5 Galadrim with spear and shield, and they're going to become bow and spear. And you can, if you only have a certain number of figures, put those cheaper spear and shield guys in player one's contingent and just flip them around so you end up with 350 points each way. And then you're also going to have, because Aragorn's going to top out at 15 figures. You definitely keep Haleth in with him. So you have 14 other slots, and fill him up with Galadrim, some more expensive Royal Guard. Just make his stuff kind of the more expensive stuff. And then you've got Aragorn who can march. You're going to have the banner with Theoden, and because Theoden's going to need the banner, because there's a couple scenarios where like he has to basically defend in the center while Aragorn marches to his rescue, or some vice versa version of that. And so you want the banner with him just to make everything around him tougher. And you want and then Aragorn could just be calling his heroic marches on the way in. And if it's one of these scenarios where you each deploy in two places and you're trying to draw together, you've got marches on both sides so that you can move quicker, because this is an all-foot warband, this is an all-foot army. So if it's going to move quickly, it really needs a march. So I guess to sum up, my advice is replace Haldir with Gamling, and then just get rid of the banner in Aragorn's warband, and then just jigger the points around so that you end up with 350 points by making the troops in Aragorn's warband more expensive and giving them bows. You can put more elves in there too. Like you can put a whole bunch of elves in Aragorn's warband. And if you really need to spend some more points in Aragorn's warband, the other thing you could put in is you could put Aldor in Aragorn's warband. And because he's a 20-point guy that you could throw in there as well. And he's actually kind of a decent shooter, and he's another 1-point hero that once you get near the Gamling's banner, you can increase you can start getting the free mites by spending 1 point from him and then immediately getting it back. Aldir is also, by the way, if you can fit in the points and make it work, Aldor is actually a good add to be with Gamling's warband, because he becomes the 1-point might generator there if you need to be calling heroic moves over and over again. But I'm not sure that may drop your numbers too low in that half of the army if Aldor goes in and you need to kind of decrease the number of figures further in that warband. That's my thought.
It's a good thought. I actually played this list as a TO, and it was one of the prizes for one of my tournaments, and I thought it was a lot of fun. My biggest suggestion is just have fun with it. I don't know, like if you'll and especially since it's your first tournament, Joseph, like just have fun with it. You guys brought a themed list, do some crazy stuff, make Theoden depressed in a game, make Aragorn run into a whole pike block in a game. Like just have fun with it.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind, don't get your head too wrapped around the shooting with this list too, because in the double scenarios, shooting tends to be less important because there's so much movement that's required. Like the number one thing you have to do at the beginning of every doubles game is figure out how to get, every doubles scenario except one, is to figure out how to get the two halves of your army combined faster than your enemy can. And that's why you need kind of the double march if you can at all swing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty solid advice. I wasn't really keeping the double scenarios in mind when I first looked at this list, but yeah, I think you definitely player 2 definitely wants Aragorn in their army. Yeah, the issue, as Dad said, is just like figuring out how to make up the 350 points. So you're dropping the banner off of that. You're keeping Haleth, so you're turning some Rohan warriors into Royal Guard. I think
so. You can add
I
in a
wonder
bunch
how
of
this.
Bows too to the Galadrim.
Hold on. Yeah, you can turn the 5 Galadrim into bowmen. Does the 33% Galadrim rate apply for the whole army or each contingent separately? Is what I'm wondering about.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Because if it applies separately, then keep it as is. But if it applies as the whole thing, I would maybe put more Galadrim in with Aragorn and less Galadrim in with Theoden.
Yeah.
Just to be able to have the bows on the sort of outside contingent, because in your sort of central bigger contingent, they won't be as useful.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Let me see. Do I have the match play guide handy? Hang on, let me see if I have the match play guide handy to answer this question.
Yeah, so that's definitely interesting. So
All
Haldir with
right.
heavy armor and bow, he's what, 85, right? And then
How dare, yeah, he's 85.
Gambling
Gambling is
is
105.
105.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's really not a big upgrade. Um,
And you get 25 points from the banner to play with, although you are gonna have to kind of rejigger things. In order to make sure you get to 350 on each side of the
yeah, but I do
division.
think if you take gambling in player one's list, I would try and find a way. And by find a way, I mean it's pretty easy. You just drop 2 models and put in Aldor, because I think being able to just immediately start calling free heroic actions in the center contingent is very useful. Just like even like calling a heroic move every turn, instead of burning through Gambling's might to get to that 0 might to start refreshing, you can immediately start refreshing Aldor. So yeah, I'd say similar to Dad's advice, move some Royal Guard into Aragorn's warband, drop the banner with him, get Gambling, find a way to fit in Aldor in list 1 as well, and then turn the 5 Galadrim with spears and shields in Aragorn's warband into spear bowmen.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
think that would make a more solid list.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Aldor is essential in player one's list because
I
you don't
mean,
want it to get too small.
he's
But
not
it's
essential, but Dad, it's 1 model. He's
yeah,
20 points. You're dropping 2 10-point models and getting 1 model in return.
yeah,
I
that's
think
fair.
being able to call free heroics is just so useful that I would say
Figure out a way to
just
do
put
it.
him in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason I'm hesitating is that player one, because that's the one with Theoden, is the one that's going to have to be like doing the like desperate stands in the center. So you want to make sure it has enough kind of frontline fighters in order to do that. Because although he's
I
one
would
model,
be
he's not a model that you kind of put in front of somebody else to fight.
Yeah, I would be more concerned, I'd say, if the max model count wasn't 40 models. Which, by
Yeah,
the way, is this max model count for 40 models throughout both lists or 40 models per list?
I
I
think it's
assume it's
for
throughout
both.
both lists. Yeah, so I'd be more
Um,
concerned about getting swarmed if you were gonna like show up against a bunch of horde armies, but because they're only gonna have like 6, 7 more models than you do. I don't know if it's that
yeah,
concerning for me. Lowering your models slightly to get some more powerful heroes in there.
yeah.
Yeah. So to go back to the question that Evan raised about is the 1/3 Galadrim restriction specific to the player's forces? So like, 1/3 of no more than 1/3 of player one's force can be Galadrim, and no more than 1/3 of player two's force can be Galadrim. The answer is not clear as I read this. So I'm looking at page 31 of the match play guide, which is on the double events talking about legendary legions. And the first sentence is, if players wish, they may elect to play using a legendary legion. In this situation, both players must bring a separate force from the same legion, following all the usual restrictions. Okay. And then it goes on to talk about how you can't duplicate heroes, which is fine. And then the last sentence in this paragraph says restrictions for a legendary legion are applied across the whole army. However, each force must contain its own separate warbands. I think that means that you just need to have 1/3 of the whole army be Galadrim, but more than a third can be stuffed into player two's division. Is that how other folks read that phrase? Restriction for a legendary legion are applied across the whole army.
I think I'd read it that way. That makes sense. I mean, you're the
Yeah,
lawyer, so I'm not going to question.
I think reading that actually seems pretty clear cut. What they're trying to do with that, because this is a restriction, so it
Yep.
applies for the entire Legendary Legion. So yeah, I think it might be interesting. Now, I'm actually torn between putting more Galadrim in Theoden's Warband, um, which gives you the fight 5 over there, and then putting the Royal Guard in Aragorn's Warband gives you the fight 5 from Haleth, or putting more Galadrim over in Aragorn's Warband, which sort of gives you that better shooting capabilities.
I
I'd
mean,
say I would probably shift the Galadrim, more of them, into Theoden's Warband, and then shift the Royal Guard out, but I'm not sure.
yeah. So, I mean, I think if you can make the points work, that makes sense. I mean, the way the scenarios work out, because Theoden is always going to be the primary source, the primary force, shooting is going to make a little more sense for him than for the other side, because he's going to be more stationary and the other side's going to be generally moving as quick as it can. But that, I mean, it's only a little bit, because shooting is kind of less important in doubles all around. At the end of the day, I'm not sure it matters all that much, because shooting is kind of less important in doubles than it is in singles. I think the primary thing is to make sure that you're spending 350 points on each side of the coin. But I mean, you're right that you can get away with less Galadrim in Aragorn's Warband, because you got Haleth and he can upgrade the Royal Guard to fight 5. Although, certain things need to happen in order for that to occur. So, having Galadrim there is going to be fine too. So I guess I wouldn't spend too much time trying to figure out, where more of the Galadrim or more of the bows should go. I think the primary work that needs to be done is to make sure that you're maxing, because you've got 15 slots in Aragorn's Warband, and you got to get up to 350 points on 15 slots. And if you can do that by throwing in a bunch of Royal Guard, if you need to do that by throwing in a bunch of expensive bow spear Galadrim, do that too.
I mean, you can also fit in one more guy with Aragorn and then put Haleth in a separate warband. Because I think there's only one double scenario
actually,
where that applies at all.
That's
And
true.
even then, Aragorn's got the free might point to come on with Haleth anyways.
Yeah, it's not actually clear. I don't think it matters in any double scenario.
Isn't there one where you deploy with Maelstrom with your secondary army, or am I thinking of something
I
different?
think you deploy Maelstrom with your armies. But let me see. Let me take a look here.
Just
so the one
Maelstrom
would be
as the army.
Yeah, let me just total conquest is the Maelstrom one. And let's see how that deploys here. Secondary. No, you're right. It is Maelstrom by Warband. So that's the one scenario
I mean,
where it
honestly,
matters.
I would do it anyways.
Yeah, I would do it anyway, because you're right. Aragorn's got a free point of might to do there. And you're right, that allows you, if Haleth goes in his own warband, that allows you to stuff an extra guy in with Aragorn's warband. And in 5 of the 6 scenarios, that's not going to matter, because you just deploy as an army rather than warband by warband. And
in the doubles contest, do you deploy warband by warband?
no,
Because that might actually help you.
You mean in total conquest or in
the whatever contest of champions is in doubles?
Oh, no, I think you just deploy forces, if I'm remembering correctly here. Yeah, no, it's primary force and then secondary force.
Well, yeah, that won't matter, but it does give you an extra guy, which I think is better than just upgrading guys.
I
So
agree. That's a good catch. Given the independent warband and keep them separately, because there's very little reason to keep him in Aragorn's warband in the doubles context.
yeah.
All right. So I guess those are our suggestions.
Yep.
Yeah, and just have fun with it. Joseph, let us know how you did. And if you guys had fun at your first tournament and made friends and stuff and got involved in the community. All right, now on to the main topic of today's episode. We are going to talk about our top 3 favorite factions. And before we go, we're going to go one at a time, starting from 3 and then 2 and then 1. And we're going to give details on why we like, first of all, why we choose these factions and what constitutes for our favorite factions. Before we do that, who is going to go first? I believe it is Matt.
Oh, am I going first? Okay, I'm going first. So
Now, Matt, I think this will be fun. Evan and I, let's guess his top 3. Doesn't have to be in order. Matt, I'm going to guess Easterling's in there. I'm going to guess Agmar's in there. And I'm going to guess Lake Town is in there.
I think Easterlings is right. I disagree with Angmar. I don't think he's got Angmar in there. I think, does he have Assault on Lothlorien in there or not, is my question. I think he's going to.
Ah, shoot, Hazog's probably.
And then I think Lake Town's in there too. So my guesses are Lake Town, Assault on Lothlorien, and Easterlings. But let's see what he said.
all right.
Go to number 3.
So I guess before I go into the list, let me go through my criteria, because we're not all going to have the same criteria for all of these things. So my criteria was simple competitive power. And the reason I chose that criteria, well, okay, it's not just simple criteria power. It's or it's not just simply power, because within the power ranking, I'm doing this based on personal preference, but so there has been a trend, in my opinion, in the lists and in the legendary legions of power creep. I think it used to be more so in the past, that you had a decent chance to kind of like come and win a tournament no matter what you took. There was one kind of inherently superior list over another. I mean, there were certainly lists that were stronger and there were lists that were weaker. And there were, certain army lists that, were kind of a joke and nobody would ever take. But I think we have seen a rise in kind of super competitor lists where there are lists nobody would take. There are average lists. There are lists that are stronger than average. And then now we've kind of emerged a list of, a group of lists that are stronger than the strong lists. And these are the ones that I think, if you want to, will dramatically increase your chance of winning a tournament if you have one of these lists, or at least popping up. And I think you all kind of hit it on the head as to what these lists are. I will say Angmar is not on my list of the top 3. I think if this was a top 4, it would be number 4.
The bridesmaid, never the bride.
Yeah. And by the way, the reason is not because I don't think it is one of these super competitive lists that will tend to put you, higher up in the tournament rankings, because I think it
like
is.
what you said though, Matt, because you're kind of giving a history of the game. It is like this becomes powerful, someone counters it, and it's just the militarization of SBG, kind of like right before World War I in Europe. And it was Agmar used to be that for a bit, and then something overtook it, and then it's kind of like building. So I like that you kind of mention that aspect of the game.
Yeah. So, if this was a list of top 4s, Agmar would be on it. The only reason it's not on my top 3 is just because it is less kind of my preferred play style. I think it is more Evan's preferred play style than it is mine, but I think it is definitely one of these super competitor lists. So to go through my three, and these three are not in list of super competitiveness. These three are kind of in my list of my preference to play them. But number three is Assault on Lothlorien. And I think this may actually be, if I was to order this in list of super competitiveness, I think this list is probably the one that I would put on top. And you know, we've talked about this list before. To recount why it is, why I think it is, you know, kind of deserves to be on this list. This is a list that, almost regardless of what situation you end up on the table, it has an answer to it, and it has a good strategy that puts the opponent at a disadvantage. This is a list, probably more so than any other, where regardless of what scenario you draw, you have a way to win the scenario, regardless of what your opponent is. And, you know, I suppose if you dig into it, there may be some edge cases where, like in certain scenarios, Goblin Town would have an edge over them, but you have to look really hard to find one of those situations, and it's not clear to me how clear cut the advantage is. Devin appears. Devin's connecting to audio. So anyway,
right in time to be like, what he's saying is crap. It makes no sense.
You know, having no knowledge of what I've said, which is usually what happens when Devin shows up and says what I've said is crap. Hey, so, Devin. So go ahead.
Well, whatever you're about to say, I'm pretty sure it's crap. I'd rather hear it from Evan or Rainier if possible.
All right, so just to catch you up with where we are, we've just shifted into discussing the lists, what our top three lists are. I've explained that my particular criteria for judging these three lists is that I believe that a species of super competitor lists has evolved. And I am talking about the top three, and I'm discussing the top three not in their order of super competitiveness, but rather in the order that I prefer to play them. So number three, what I'm talking about is Assault on Lothlorien, which is a, you know, when you put this list down on the table, there are almost no tactical situations that will evolve where you're like, oh shoot, I have no way to combat this. Because the combination of the number of figures you can get in that army, the ability to get quick kills, the mobility that it has with flying and creepy crawly stuff, and the ability to win shooting wars with a combination of darkness and +1 to wound from its archers, which it can buy en masse, kind of cover almost all of the bases. The only reason the reason I put this at 3 instead of 1 is just because of how my playstyle interacts with this. Of the 3 super competitor lists I'm going to talk about, this is the one that I have kind of the least fun playing. And that's because it depends on this kind of combination it depends on a combination and interaction of very quirky stuff in order to make it work. With, you know, casting spells at the right time, getting your bats in the right places, getting your spiders invisible and enraged at the right times. And there's just a lot of moving parts that you have to get all to work together. And, you know, I have to think harder than I want to when I play this list, which doesn't mean that I won't play it. And, you know, I've done well with it. I've seen other people do really well with it. But just as far as my play style goes, I put this at the bottom.
So just to make sure, because maybe I misunderstood it, I thought we for me, I heard like we were doing 3 favorite lists, but I didn't know if that had anything to do with competitiveness.
It doesn't
It
have
depends
to.
on you.
Okay,
Depends
because
on you,
my
because
third
we're all
one
gonna-
is a real garbage tier list, bro.
Yeah, whatever criteria you want to use are
Okay.
perfectly fine.
Okay.
So by the way, also Devin, we're just because of orders of time, because you were coming late and I'm dropping off early, we're going to go through all 3 of our lists as a person and then go to the next person.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay.
So what's your number 2, Matt?
So my number 2 list is in fact Army of Lake Town. And this is Army of Lake
Wonder
Town,
what
not
number 1 is.
Survivors of Lake Town. And again, for reasons we've discussed. So the reason this has kind of become a super competitor list is because of the fact it is such a cheap way to get get a significant number of fight for figures all across the board, all with spear supports and all in the range of a banner.
You can give them axes too, right? Free, because
no, you cannot give them axes.
You can't know.
But who cares? Because the Army of Lake Town has become the way to get the expensive killer good figures into lists and still have enough decent bulk in the list to support the flanks of those killer figures. So, regardless of which figures you want to throw in there, you can throw in, if you like playing wizards, you can throw in Saruman and Galadriel. If you like playing heavy hitters, you can, and you don't mind playing with a red list, you can throw in Elendil, you can throw in Aragorn if you want. You can throw in, whatever your favorite killy figure is on the good side, and who would normally be too expensive to put in another list at a reasonable tournament level, points level. You can throw them into this list and they will do just fine, and they'll be a very powerful list. And then the rest of the guys with, Braga calling the free heroics, and the master upping everybody to fight for, and giving him free banners, and Alfred giving more might points to the other 3 guys, or the other 2 guys. Yeah, they'll do what they need to do to hold the flanks of this army, while whatever it is that you want to throw into the army goes and does whatever it's going to do. So that's my number 2. And my number 1 list is, I'm sure as everybody guessed, the Easterlings, and in particular the host of the Dragon Emperor Legendary Legion.
3 out of 3 for me. Let's go.
Yeah,
3 for 3. I'm 2
Guessed
for
them
3.
all.
Yep.
All right.
Devin's
And
disqualified. And
Man,
Devin,
I
so
thought the
basically,
Easterlings sucked. I made sure they were my last pick if the 20 ranks.
Yeah.
Nah,
yeah, they don't suck. I'm
kidding for anyone listening to
Yeah.
this and wondering.
So what the host of the Dragon Emperor Legendary Legion has done is created a list that can out elf the elves. You end up with a decent number of models now with the points buffs that come with this Legendary Legion, to the point where you're going to outnumber the elves. Basically, everybody that is of equal or potentially equal quality to you, you're going to outnumber. And everybody that is lower quality to you, you're going to have enough numbers so that you can outmatch them. And you also have, between the Dragon Emperor and Rutabi, backed up by Borgir, you have enough tricks with Borgir's cannon to really, really screw around with how the other guy is going to play his game. And you not have enough fight 6 striking heavy hitters that anybody who is going to match you in numbers and qualities isn't going to have the heroes to deal with those 2. So at the end of the day, with the exception, I think, of Assault on Lothlorien, most of the time you put this list on the table, you're going to outmatch your opponents. The only exception is when you're playing against an Uber Horde like Goblin Town, in a scenario where only being an Uber Horde matters, like Reconnoiter or Domination or something like that, where just because the one thing the Dragon Emperor host doesn't like to do is kind of separate and go in a couple different directions because they don't quite have the numbers to do that. They can get swarmed if they have to split up into small groups. But in every other situation, you're going to start with a leg up. And if you're, by the way, if you're in a meta that has a whole bunch of elvish armies, you want an army that's going to disassemble elves, this is the one for you. I think I played this army against like a dozen elf-based armies. And it never have I even like been in a position where I was even remotely worried about the outcome of the game from putting figures down on the table and going. And this was even in one scenario this is even in one game I remember well from Articon, where for some reason in my head I had thought Elrond was fight 7 and was like beating Rutabi because Rutabi was only rolling ones to strike up.
I still remember that. I gave you so much crap for that.
Well,
and you deserved it too.
And I did deserve it. I did deserve it. And in my defense, at that point at Articon, I was low on mental fuel and not kind of firing on all cylinders. But by the way, I won that game too, and that game was never in doubt. Even with that additional buff given to Elrond. But anyway,
but I like what you're saying though, Matt, and I think like even the drum is a cherry on the top because you mentioned the weaknesses. The Easterlings aren't really a horde army, and they're dominantly infantry, but shooting does not scare them, and I think that's the big kind of cherry on the top, where it's like you have maybe 40 something models at like a high point event, and you do know if they have crossbows or if they have elven shooting, they'll take out enough to where like those numbers really dwindle down and they can take you out. With the Easterlings, with the drum and all those heroes, it's kind of like it's well distributed on how dangerous the army is. You have a fight 5 pipe block, a 12-inch banner. You have a mega hero, the Golden King, which we always talk about the buffs he gives.
Well, the Dragon Emperor, please don't confuse him
King,
with the Golden King. He gets really upset about that.
I'm sorry, I don't want to offend him. I know
he's got more men carrying him.
Yeah, that's right.
The Dragon Emperor is like, I see battle reports online and stuff with Easterlings dominating, and in these battle reports, he's never really in combat. Like, imagine if people like Matt utilize him in combat too, and he does well. Rutabi does well for like the movement, and it's just a really well balanced list that you can play from little or from small to high numbers, and I think it's really just amazing. I agree with you, Matt. You guys can probably guess where my lists are going.
So just to sum up, I think if the criteria is the one that I use for selecting lists, which is super competitiveness, the lists that have become super competitors are the ones that have the answers to kind of the most tactical situations where you put them on the table. They're the lists where you put the figure, you put the list down, the other guy puts his list down, and then they announce the scenario, and you are not going, oh crap, I'm doomed. And that's what kind of makes, I think, a list a super competitor list is where in all or almost all situations in matchups, you're going to have at least some level of advantage.
Mm-hmm. All right, who is going to go next? Any volunteers?
Sure.
I will. I'll read. Oh, want to do rock, paper, scissors, Devin?
Sure. For all the viewers listening on Spotify, they're gonna be like, "How do I know who won?"
Oh, we can do this over the we can do this over the chat. Hold on.
Can we do it over the chat?
Yeah.
All right.
So,
yeah, we're having a podcasting
thing.
history first right here. We're doing
type in your
rock, paper,
thing,
scissors live on air.
And when I say shoot, post it. All right.
And I'll read out what they.
So we just hit enter as soon as you hit shoot. Okay.
You guys ready?
Yep.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
No.
I win.
Devin won. Evan got rock. Devin got scissors. Okay.
All right. So the better man won as always in rock, paper, scissors. So I guess I'll be going first. So yeah, just to talk about my criteria. My criteria were pretty similar to Dad's actually. I tended to pick competitive lists for this top 3. And and then basically what I did is I went in and I excluded all of the ones I hate. So you won't be seeing Assault upon Lothlorien here. You won't be seeing Easterlings here. Because I don't like those legendary legions. I think they're way overtuned and shouldn't be in the game. But moving on from that and my personal opinions, let's go
We
into
forgot
more
the
of my
guest of
personal
Evan.
opinions. So starting off with number 3, I actually it's either a tie or I think maybe one is slightly favored, but I've got both Angmar and Mordor because for me they fill very similar roles. I think if I were to pick in nowadays meta, I think I'd maybe favor Mordor a bit more because I feel like their matchups into things such as Assault on Lothlorien, um, and a few of the other strong armies going around are a bit better than Angmar's, especially with all of the shooting and whatnot. But I mean, these armies, I know how to play them. I've played them for 3, 4, 5 years, something like that. So I mean, I know all the tricks, and they're a lot of fun for me to play. And obviously they're very, very strong armies. A well-piloted Angmar and Mordor list, unless you pop up with Angmar against like what's it called, Assault upon Helm's Deep or something like that. There's always the threat of Gullivar just going through and killing all of your opponent's models. And until your opponent is able to neutralize that big Gullivar threat, then Angmar is always able to compete and do well. Mordor is a bit more balanced, but just the ability to have access to all of the ring wraiths and black Numenorians, which are, in my opinion, one of the best troop options in the game, and being able to ally with everything. These two factions, while they aren't like, in my opinion, they aren't as ludicrously insane as some of those legendary legions. They hit that sweet spot for me of quite strong competitively. They're definitely able to win tournaments, and I also just like them. The only reason they didn't score higher is because after playing them for so long, I'm just kind of bored of them.
Ennui.
I like what you said though, Evan, because I was thinking the exact same thing. You're a shenanigans player, and Mordor is a more balanced shenanigans list. So I totally agree with you there.
As opposed to Angmar, that's an overbalanced shenanigans list.
What would you say?
Agmar is a tilted shenanigans list.
What would we describe as shenanigans? Because like my lists have lots of shenanigans, but they're very different shenanigans than like the ones Evan plays. So I often thought of Evan as actually not a
Yeah,
shenanigans
like
player.
I assume you, Devin, like you picked Ruffians as number 1, right? So you
A
know
close
the
cousin.
Bill Fernie and the I don't even know the other Ruffian heroes, to be honest, but they
Ruffians
do
are the
some
only
weird
army
stuff.
in
So
the
I guess
game that
those
I
can
do
be
not have.
classified as shenanigans.
No, actually,
Oh
Ruffians are
yeah.
the only army. They're the okay. No, so technically I have them. They're not assembled. So I
Mhm.
actually have like 60 Ruffians plus the heroes, but I need to find someone who will, I
You
can pay to.
need to find somebody sufficiently bored to paint them all.
Yeah, basically. every commission painter I offer them to, they're
You
like,
want to paint 140 civilians.
So I actually could not pick the Ruffians, though. Shenanigans is exactly actually as you mentioned. Maybe not the whole Ruffian army. Sure, actually, they're probably actually boring to play against, but like the guy Rowan. I want to say Rowan
Burns the house
Thistlewood or
down.
whatever. Yeah, he can burn terrain down.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. Like that's shenanigans, to me. But like, I'm the guy like bringing.
You see, Devin, my type of shenanigans are killing the opponent's 200-point hero on the first turn. That's what I will qualify as shenanigans.
I'm
And
still
yes, Angmar and Mordor qualify as that quite well.
I'm
And so
still
does Assault on Lothlorien, but I'm never gonna play that ever.
yeah, I'm still shocked to learn that Rowan Satnick is an arsonist, but I guess we'll
Wow. Okay.
Now we
Wow.
know.
Shots fired.
To our Canadian viewers, we don't mean that. It was all in
Actually,
jest.
no, it's like totally different names. It's Rowan. It was
Yeah,
the ruffian, and
Ronin.
his name is Ronin.
Yeah,
Like more
Fun
like
guy.
not the same spelling, but more like a Ronin from like
Like a
Samurai.
samurai.
Yeah,
Okay.
so like actually it is different names entirely. Close.
But to us, none of us Americans can speak English well, so like it's all the same to us.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go. We just make it up. That's how the English language
It's
works.
true.
We're like, why is
Yeah.
it spelt that way? I don't know. Just go with it.
Because in one of the 16 predecessor languages to this, it made sense. So, but nobody knows which language that was or when that was. Yeah.
All right, what's your number 2, Evan?
Yeah. So just to rank Angmar and Mordor, I think very close, but I think Angmar might be 4th and Mordor might be 3rd. But it's extremely close. It could go either way. On to my number 2. And number 2 is actually, well, a very uncreative pick. You saw this one as the last number 2 as well. It's Army of Lake Town. I mean, it's not really the pure faction. Well,
Oh man,
the
who
pure
would pick
faction
that
is-
as their number 2?
Yeah, I know. What idiot would pick Army of Lake Town as number 2?
Yeah.
You put an
honestly.
Iron Hills chariot in yours, right? Like a good man with shenanigans.
Oh, Devin.
With
Oh,
Kim,
Devin.
you announce it right before you go to Articon. so
My
everyone-
sweet, my
Yeah,
sweet, sweet prince.
Actually, mine was with survivors, but close. I need Gandalf to really sweeten it.
No, by the way, the Iron Hills Chariot with Army of Lake Town is the one I took. I think I took that one to
Yeah.
one down in Nashville or something like that.
Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah.
You did all right in that tournament. I think you
Well,
got run over by a Balrog in Contest of Champions.
No, I didn't get run
No,
over,
no,
but it
no,
was a
that
hard
was
fought
me.
loss to the Balrog.
Oh,
in
you too?
No, me too.
Oh,
in
okay.
Contest of Champions, I think that Balrog at the end of the game had 3 wounds left. But the one I got run over on was against
it was the
one of
Ugluk
the
Scouts guy.
Yeah, it was the Ugluk Scouts swarm, and that was the one where I think the chariot moved once. Like it charged in, and then on the first turn, and then after that, I think proceeded to like lose every priority and heroic move roll off to follow, and never moved. And it seems like whenever I take the hero's chariot, that happens in at least one game. One game in every tournament, I'll have a game where that chariot just never moves, and that's the game that you're doomed.
So to extrapolate on that, the trick with Army of Lake Town, as Dad said earlier, is not to take absolutely garbage models that can only fit in that way and then lose tournaments because of it. The trick is to take super strong models that wouldn't be able to fit into any other list at that points level, and then put them in with Army of Lake Town. Being able to do that, you can usually use those heroes to also patch up Army of Lake Town's weaknesses. Like for example, a common pairing we saw at the last Articon was taking Army of Lake Town with Glorfindel and Círdan. And Círdan basically patches up all of Lake Town's weaknesses. He's got the auto pass courage bubble. He's got the blinding light bubble. And then Glorfindel sort of provides that hitty hero that Lake Town really lacks. But really, you
Is
can
this in
just
combination with Bard or like without Bard?
No, Bard sucks. Don't take Bard in Army of Lake Town.
Well, all right, put a pin in that, and we'll go back to it. But finish the thought.
I don't take Bard in Army of Lake Town because, well, partially because my Bard is just absolutely awful and never succeeds at anything. But
And by that he means his father. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah, this is all metaphorical.
That's right.
I mean, both can be true. Like I can both be doing a metaphor and speaking the truth, which is what I'm doing here.
Yes,
We'll
the
know for
best
sure
metaphors. The best
We'll know for
metaphors
sure
are
if Matt
grounded in
starts
truth.
eating cherry tomatoes on the show, then we'll be like, okay, yeah, I think this is a little bit messaging going on.
No, that's a different metaphor.
All right, Evan. So what's your third? Or what's your first, excuse me?
Well, hang
Well,
on.
my
Before
first-
we do that, let me go back to where I put the pin. and that's that at the right points level, there is nothing wrong with pure Army of Lake Town and throwing in Bard and all the heroes, and you end up with like at 600 points a 70-figure army that has
With
Bard in it,
crazy.
and a master with a
600, I think
12-inch
it's
banner.
60 figures.
So BS that Bard can lead them.
Close enough. Yeah, exactly.
And we've talked a lot
Yeah.
about like the scenarios being very movement orientated with 60 models at 600.
Yeah, at the right points level, just taking pure Army of Lake Town is definitely a power play. So anyway,
And
that was what I wanted to say.
If your Bard doesn't roll like my Bard, then it's an absolutely great option. The issue is my Bard. Well, first off, my Bard has never had 6 might in his life. Like Alfred has never given him all 6 might points, which I think is a bad start. Usually I roll at least 1, but sometimes I roll 2, and then my Bard has 2 might points for the entire game. But my Bard tends to either not wound the warriors he's trying to heroic combat off of, or botch his first roll and lose his horse, and then be useless for the rest of the game. Which is why I usually take him in Survivors, but not Army, because in Survivors he also provides that huge banner bonus. But if you are more confident in your Bards rolling than mine, I would say that absolutely pure Army of Lake Town at lower points is a great option as well. Moving on to number 1, and hear me out, guys. Okay, at number 1. I have a tie between 2 armies I've been enjoying playing lately, and that is Helm's Guard and Theodred's Guard, the 2 guards. So some may be thinking,
damn, what a cliffhanger.
Evan, this is insane. These guys,
you cut off. Evan
You cut out for
like 3 seconds.
Oh no, I cut off.
Like, oh shit, what's happening?
What-
Is he
what-
gonna
what
say it?
cl-
Is he gonna say it?
Yeah. Next time,
what
join us to find
cliffhanger
out.
did I leave?
Well, so you said some may be thinking, and then there was a long blank pause in which I was thinking, yeah, that is exactly what I'm thinking. How did you know? So some may be thinking.
So some may be thinking. All right, moving on. So that was my number 1. Thank you guys for listening. Let's
I
move
agree
on to
totally.
Devin
That
now.
was really good. Good job.
All right, yeah. So hopefully this won't cut out this time.
No, but those are super strong legions, to be honest. So I'm curious about which
They do play very different. Well, no, they're pretty similar, but
Yeah,
I
so
think Helm is
these-
all centered. But go ahead.
These guys are not quite up there, I'd say, with the other super strong legendary legions. But they compensated for this by me just like loving them to death. From I think years and years ago it started. I just sort of had a fascination with taking all-foot Rohan. I remember I took them to one event, lost every game with them, and then was super sad like 3 or 4 years ago. And now that they're finally viable, I think they're probably my favorite set of lists to play just in general. And honestly, I've found them to be quite strong. I've taken them to a couple of tournaments. I've done really well with them. Just the idea of being able to have these 8-inch throwing weapons just en masse, and also being able to spear support all of your guys as well, is an extremely powerful ability. And sure, they have some weaknesses in that blinding light sort of shuts down all of their throwing spears, but just being able to play them so flexibly in every game, because you can form them up with your Royal Guard and you can charge forward and fight battle line on battle line with your especially in Helm's Legendary Legion, you've got your Fight 5 Royal Guard with your banner. That'll give you a lot of hitting power. And you can also just play them super skirmishy, spread them all out, and just throw weapons at your opponent, harass them, and then go in for the kill when you can. And both of these armies can sort of do this well. I remember a particular game at Masters where I played against Theodred's Guard, and just playing against a well-played variant of either Helm's Guard or Theodred's Guard is extremely infuriating, honestly, because sometimes it feels like there's nothing you can do. Because if you spread out and try and fight them, they'll cut you down. But if you stay together, then they can spread out even more and throw stuff at you, or they can just form up, make a shield wall, and beat your shield wall one-on-one. So I think if I were to pick which one I prefer, I think I personally prefer Helm's Guard, just because I like the way Helm Hammerhand plays. The ability to have all of those free might points is extremely important. And just having a secondary threat other than your Fight 5 Royal Guard with mass throwing weapons is extremely important. Now, they do have bad matchups. Something like a Lothlorien list or any type of elf list in general is pretty tough because they will either outfight you or be equal to you on fight value, and they will also usually have blinding light, which takes away a lot from your throwing weapons. Playing against the Easterlings as well also isn't easy, especially if you're taking Theodred's Guard or a Helm's Guard list that isn't fight 5. Because you're going to have trouble breaking through their lines. You really have to use your throwing weapons a lot, and even then, they've got their drums, so they can close on you relatively quickly. But even with those downsides, I found it to be a very strong list, and I also just love them so much that I couldn't put them anywhere but number 1.
No, it's good. It's good. I really think like Theodred is a really undervalued model, and Hammerhand is like really, really good. And I especially like those for like lower points lists, and you're seeing a lot of those pop up in the state. So very cool picks.
All right. Well, I guess I'll run through mine. So, unlike the Iversons, my lists are not competitive, well, except for the number 1. It's fairly up there, but
except for the one that actually is on your list.
Yeah, the actually on no. I mean, like, so I guess I'll run through them real quick. So basically, number 3 on the list, most fun for me to play is not necessarily the Gray Company, but Rangers of the North. So not the Legion specifically, though. Arguably, the Legion is way more competitive because normally you just ignore the Rangers and you just play the heroes. But I actually like playing with the Rangers, and I like trying to make them work. Newsflash, it cannot work. It doesn't really work very well.
Newsflash, I still haven't succeeded, but I'm still trying.
No, like, so
after that one game where Azog played in Lords of Battle or something like that and killed like 50 Rangers and then got 20 might points or something like that.
Yeah, anyone with Blood and Glory or like any rule similar, it's a nightmare. And the wrong scenario, the one that it's like, oh, if you kill more heroes than the opponents, it's like it's a nightmare. So barring the fact that the army needs some serious like rethinking, the army's really fun to play. I love the fact that it moves just as much in the combat phase as it does in the move phase. It is a very much a strong siding type of list that you're trying to first assassinate a single target. Normally whatever they want to kill, barring like something ridiculous like a Balrog or whatever, normally whatever they want to kill, they can kill at range, given that the entire army has might to do that. And being able to call those multiple row combos, you need Hoverrod in the list. Otherwise, it really doesn't function. But, if you can actually successfully pull off the multiple hero combats in a single turn, it's a scary turn for your opponent. Depending on if they're a horde list, then it's not so scary. And depending on if you have an enemy elf list, which would be very bad because now you're losing fights. So, need a couple tweaks in the army to make it work. It does lose steam as soon as you run out of might. So that's kind of a tricky hard part about it, which is why Aragorn's essential, or anyone who has kind of an infinite might mechanic. Luckily he's in the list, so that's an easy solve. So basically that's been an army. Any of those like elite small armies, I really actually enjoy playing them, even though this particular one is probably the most I don't know, hard in that direction. Barring going all hero. Well, I know Great could come, or it's all hero, but I mean like all real heroes, named characters, barring that kind of thing. So now with the second army that I like playing, this one should come at no shock to anyone. It's actually the Hobbits. I still think they are a goofy, fun list that has a lot of cool mechanics. They added in even more. We got our fireworks, finally got flowers and traps. Thank God. That was the coolest addition, probably to me. The problem is in the new edition, they made Hobbits less competitive, mainly because one, they have a reduced access to March, and obviously their inability to ally into certain things. But the army fails without heroic march, so oftentimes you feel kind of forced to have either something that brings your opponent to you, which with hobbits reduced range and bows is actually less likely. Before that wasn't as much of an issue, but also in matches like Maelstrom or anything where you have to go hunt an objective, like the relic missions and whatnot, you only have 6 points of march in the entire army, and that's tied to some of your most important characters, so they get strung out. So a lot of times moving 4 inches a turn, March just allows you to keep pace with like everybody else. Without it, though, you are really struggling to keep up. What I do like about the Hobbits, though, as well, is they allowed me to play my infamous double wizards that I really like. So I love double wizard. Anyone who knew me in the previous edition, I was constantly playing stuff like that. But generally with Gondor, a little harder to play it nowadays. And with this, when Radagast was not nerfed, which was like all of like 6 minutes of SPG in the new edition, it was really cool because then hobbits really could function well. You had infinite nature's wrath, plus then increased support from Gandalf, and then you had this whole army on the side. So that was like, oh wow, this actually could be an army that's like my thing. They nerfed Radagast, and now Sauron is like nearly impossible to bring into the army because you have to play. No, sorry. Who do you have to play in the the Vanquishers? Not the Vanquishers. You have to play one person before you can bring Lady of Light. Is it Saruman? It's Saruman, right? So Saruman is still possible.
Any model
Hero
from
of
the
Valor.
White Council.
That's right. She was reduced to Hero of Fortitude.
So you could take you could also take Gandalf and Lady of Light, which seems like a really weird combo. You could take like
so Saruman.
I think Glorfindel, if you want a hitty hero, is probably your best option, but even then that's sort of got some anti-synergy because he's already got Fortify Spirit. So
and
Saruman is usually your best option.
And that's who I ended up bringing to do my double wizard shenanigans that I really like to do. Saruman doesn't bring a lot to the table that hobbits need. In fact, Nature's Wrath would have been more useful than like RF Command and such that he's bringing to the table. But, hobbits still remain to be one of those armies I like playing just because of the gimmicky fun nature. But yes, they are far less competitive than before, and making them competitive, you really just need strong, hard-hitting heroes that can, in the hobbits, are essentially just a buffer that, are holding down the lines. But the heroes are putting in a lot of work because the hobbits can't put in much work. Once the shooting phase is done and the throwing rocks is over, like, it's really difficult. At that point, you're really playing around. So, you often see things like Gwahir and whatnot. But, still in popularity, you can put elves behind hobbits. So that is still a common trick. If not elves, then like Gondorians or whatever. And I know they're only fight 3, but it's not fight 1. So that helps. So basically, as a final thing, I go into overviews of entire factions. My absolute favorite one to play is Far-Harad, which is probably the most competitive of the ones that, I've just discussed. With their major mitigating problem is the courage issue, which arguably you could say the leadership fixes. But I'm forgiving any noise behind me. I actually have someone working on my yard outside. But with Far-Harad, one of the main reasons I like them, I do like half trolls. Love half trolls. Love putting a front line to them. That's always fun. As Evan knows, he's played against me with that a couple times, I believe. But the main thing is the cavalry actually function the way I think cavalry should in this game, or I wish they did, which is we trample. I love like killing my opponents in the move phase without having an ability to respond. Now, keep in mind that mechanic could be borderline broken if done wrong. So I understand why they don't throw it in the game, but being able to do that, kill models in the move phase, no response other than a heroic move, I think that's wonderful. So it's a lot of fun for me. I enjoy that.
It is nice, Devin, because it does bring like an already heavy hitting army that can also like break your battle lines before you even hit into the combat phase. So like the half trolls mixed with the camels mixed with the king, who I think is like one of the best heroes actually in the whole game. Uh, he's like a little mini Boromir who, if you get a rogue combat off of him, he can just like knock down up to 8 or 9 or 10 like low defense models. It's just crazy. So it is. I like that Devin. Like I love Far Harad for those cool different dynamics of play.
And the king is huge. Like the fact that the king is very, very powerful in the list. And
You could duplicate him too because he's not a named hero. That's
yeah.
huge too.
And that he's a big one, especially for like enemy heroes. When I meet a Glorfindel or a Elrond or whatever on horse, I'm always pretty much really happy to keep them on that horse because you get them in combat, you just charge in, and even if you do a heroic combat to do that to charge them in, now they get knocked off their horse, and it's a pretty low chance that they're even able to strike you. So I do like little shenanigans like that.
So just to focus back on the hobbits, because I think that's really the important thing that you said, and everything else was just kind of noise.
Thanks, man.
I have felt that what took kind of the hobbits off the list of things that's fun to play is the fact that the core hobbits themselves went from being somewhat underpriced to somewhat overpriced.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they went from being underpriced at 3 points a pop to overpriced at 4 points a pop. And you know, I often wondered if there was ever a case for a half point value. It was this. And yeah, look, I mean, we know nobody at Games Workshop listens to whatever we say, but if anybody out there has the ear of anybody at Games Workshop,
The 6 viewers out there.
Yeah, exactly. If any of you 6 have the ear of somebody at Games Workshop, the hobbits are screaming out for, a half point cost. And I understand we don't want to like say, well, they're 3.5 points, so now we have to deal with fractions. But the rules have another way of dealing with this, and that's where you buy them by pairs. So what 7. 2 for 7, or you could say, or if you get 1, they're 4, right? You get an odd one, they're 4. And there is precedent for this. Vault Warden teams use the exact same mechanic where you get 2 figures for 25 points. And I think hobbits need to be 2 figures for 7 points to.
You could brand it too, Matt. Call it the halfling rule.
That actually, that's an interesting shout out. That the one I was actually thinking was make the archers and sheriffs 4 points. You keep the other one at 4 points, and you end up having kind of the balance being strewn across, sheriffs and archers that are slightly undercosted, and then the other guys overcost. But I like your solution actually a lot.
That's
I hadn't even thought about
actually,
that
because I was actually considering a different thing. Because I think what made the hobbits powerful was the archers, right? I think the archers were what was like truly underpointed. So I would have almost left the sheriffs and the hobbit militia at 4 and 3 points respectively, and then just bumped the hobbit archers up to 5 points,
so the only reason I did it that way was because the archers are naturally limited by the 1/3 rule. So I was okay with them being still under par. But I mean, yeah, that would work as well. I just figured if they were all 4 points, it would just be an easy, because you're inflating the price of the army by the majority of the models, which is the other guys, like the little ones. So that's the reason I was like, all right, if you really want to increase your point cost, keep them at 4. That means when you have 60 model army, you're adding 40 points to this army, and then you're still getting the other ones kind of, but I mean, you just make the archers sufficiently terrible, which I understand they have a higher fight value, and that makes sense lore wise, but yeah, otherwise what you mentioned is fine too. I mean, I imagine you're going to get a cheaper army doing it that way. Like if your archers are still 5 points, you only get average 21, 23 archers in an army, generally, somewhere in that range.
So they're never going to put sheriffs and hobbit and militia at the same points value anyways. So I mean, even if they are technically both as useful, because hobbit militias can get axes and whatnot, they're not going to keep that into account. So I think sheriffs are always at least going to be 1 point more than militia.
Yeah. And the only way I'm not convinced the sheriffs are overpriced. If they're overpriced, they're also only a half point overpriced. So the issue here with the pricing, and one of the reasons why I think it comes to the fore so much for Hobbit Militia is that those 1 point variations become much, much more impactful when the points levels get really low, right? I mean, the difference between the change that happened to the Hobbit Militia, where they went from 3 points to 4 points, was essentially what a 1/3 increase in
I
their
mean,
points.
four hobbits turned into 3 hobbits.
Yeah, 4 hobbits turned into 3 hobbits. Yeah, and that is much. That is as opposed to going from 4-point sheriffs to 5-point sheriffs, where 5 sheriffs turned into 4 sheriffs. And I mean, I think I'm almost okay with the sheriffs being 5 points. Perhaps an argument could be made that they should be 4.5 points, but I think they were kind of under costed at 4. And I think if you made sheriffs 4 points across the board, you would start seeing like armies of all sheriffs across the board at 4 points. I know I'd certainly think about it. But anyway, just a bit of hobbity digression there.
And you're absolutely right that the sheriffs were priced down, that you put them everywhere. You'd have to adjust them or limit them, maybe, possibly. I don't know that you would limit them, but in the lore, how many were in the lore? 16?
There were 13.
Yeah, 13. So it's like, okay, there's an argument to say, but then I guess if you do that to them, then you got to do it to Fountain Court Guard, and then we continue that train of logic.
Then Rob will cry.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, it would be good to not have it finally stop having those lists with 21 Nazgul on the table, but
I don't know why they don't. Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy part. The Nazgul are limited. Like, I know it's just a joke, but I'm like, you're alluding to it. It's like they have a physical limit on them. So I'm like, why couldn't we actually limit those elite troops and then just make them kind of undercosted for their price? So yeah, you're always bringing them, but maybe they have limitations within that. Like they only can come with Denethor or Huron or whoever, I don't know. Like,
look, at the end of the day, if the points values actually reflected value, you wouldn't have to worry about any of that, right? Because it would all sort itself out.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but because as you say, once, I mean, I can understand. There are a whole bunch of figures in the game that ought to be kind of limited numbers wise, like pretty sure Earl didn't have 20 sons, but
or the Fountain Court Guard.
You don't know that.
With mithril helmets, and you see like 40 of them.
Yeah. Exactly. But
well, yeah, I mean, arguably the Sons of Errol, you could think of the sons as more direct descendants rather than, or maybe 2-3 descendants removed versus the rest of the Rohirrim.
The grandnephews once removed of Earl.
Yeah, exactly. There was a certain time where it was like, all right, no more Errol blood here.
I mean, I could double check the made up lore, but I think technically Games Workshop says that like they're not actually Errol's children. They're just like an elite guard that like loved him so much that they considered themselves his children or something. Hold on,
that would make a lot more sense to me.
In reality, it's a cult.
I actually never interpreted them as his sons, because if they were really his son, they would be named characters. Like
I think it's just like they're
just like a
elite guard descendant of it or something.
Actually, I think Evan's description, what he just said, even though I think he pulled it right from GW's argument, is the most accurate to me. They just consider themselves his sons.
Okay, so according to their little blurb before their profile, they're an elite section of Rohan royal knights that were founded in the days of the first king. Although few in number, these expert warriors are a force to be reckoned with upon the battlefield, for they fight with the strength and skill of their founder. So he founded them. I don't know if by founded they mean like, founded or like founded. So
I'm going to assume he did not give birth to all these men,
or at least he's not acknowledging them for child support purposes.
I mean, it does say there are a few in number. I mean, maybe he's just like Genghis Khan, right? He just had so many children that
that's right.
Which I'm not against that argument, given the that was a totally different society than the Rohan we know today.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe that's the unspoken lore of Tolkien.
So what is
Oh my God.
it like
None,
one
none of us,
in
none of us chose like Sons of Earl in our list, but we're talking about it for like 15 minutes.
what is it like 1 in 10 people alive today are descended from Genghis Khan?
One
like
in
that?
3 people in Rohan are descended from Earl.
Earl, yeah. Well, I thought you were going to say like 1 in 10 people are descended from Genghis Khan, and everybody else is descended from Earl.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, hopefully, we see hobbits get a little bit. I mean, at this point, the hobbit love is gone, with Scouring the Shire being the only supplement to reasonably put them in. So I guess Harfoot's next. I mean, it's about the only supplement edition I could think of.
Yeah.
So,
all right, back to Rainier.
Okay, you guys can probably never guess what my top 3 factions are going to be, or even a clue of.
Let's see. All right, so I'm going to say Harad.
Corsairs and Khand.
Well, I was going to say Harad, Khand, and Easterlings, because he's already dropped.
Oh yeah, you already told Easterlings. Yeah, you spoiled that one. Yeah,
yeah.
Right.
I would say Matt has it exactly right.
All right, well, podcast is done. Join us next time for.
So my third top, I guess, faction is Khan. I think the 3 things that I choose when I choose to play are aesthetic, because I'm going to paint these bad boys and I want to like have fun painting them. Lure, I'm a real big fan of Tolkien, and I like the lure of all these factions, and play style. So Khan covers all 3 of those. The aesthetic is really unique because you don't see it in the movies.
But is it extremely unique?
Oh God,
not really.
You don't have to do this to him, Dad.
All right.
No, I lived in Korea for 2.5 years, and I just really like that. They just look very Eastern Asian. And when you paint them up, the banners on their back, which of course it doesn't give justice, knowing none of them have the banner for scenarios.
I was about to say, according to
literally
rule,
everyone has a banner. So, but it's just cool to paint up, and you see many different color schemes of people inspired to paint them in purple, blues, whites, reds. And they look really cool. Lure, I love the idea of them always coming and invading Rohan. Any evil men factions I'm a fan of, because I like the gray area there. Many people mistake Tolkien's writing for being just black and white, but there's a lot of gray area there with evil men siding with Sauron, whether it be for money, power, influence, or revenge. So I like the lure aspect of them. Finally, the play style. Now, Khand only really has 2 heroes and 3 warriors, and they're all duplicated basically. But the chariot is what gives them a really cool play style. Just like Devin said with the camels, where they're just killing people in the move phase. I really like that. And I like the Khandish horseman because for 13 points, you get a really versatile archer that you can strike up to strength 4 in the charge. He's fight 4, and he can kill stuff pretty well. So I just find myself really loving to play them. I dip in a couple armies that are like evil men, but I always want to go back to playing Khand. And I think they're really cool. I think what would put them over the edge to make them competitive in a Legion is if you gave them maybe some named heroes with like a cool Wainwriter rule, where you get a warband kind of like Sharku. You get a named hero on horse, not on chariot, and he gets to lead a warband of only horsemen that gets the ambush rule. I think that would really bring like a cool dynamic to it, because I think pure Khand isn't too competitive, but it's still one of my top 3.
So I would like to add a quick thing in here, Rainier, because last episode, for viewers who remember, I believe you picked the Khandish chieftain as one of your top 5 heroes, and no one could really figure out what you were possibly thinking with that. So if you would like to elaborate on why you've picked this terrible hero to be one of your favorites.
All right. So many people would go for the king, but I like that the chieftain on a chariot with fight 5 and a platform that's hard for him to kill is only 85 points. So that's a really good, in my opinion, take. I know Easterlands, we talked about the Legion. You don't really want to ally it anymore. But I do really think I put a list together with something like 44, 45 models. It had the Golden King, Rutabi, and 2 chieftains on the side. And I think they add a lot of versatility against a lot of these low defense hordes, Army of Lake Town being one, for example, Corsairs being another. And Fight 5, you can really tie up Rohan armies, another example, those heroes, and delay them. I'm a huge delay player. I know we talked with some German players about that type of meta. Pascal talked about that, and I was shocked to see that, oh, the Germans play just like me, or I play like the Germans. I'm a really big delay player, and if I can even toss the Chariot, 85 points, 2 might, into a hero by the looks of, let's say, Glorfindel, you can tie him up for like up to 4 turns. And that's really mitigating things. At the best, you dehorse them, win it off, and maybe like wound him or have the potential to kill because you can go up to strength 5. At the least, you're delaying a hero for like 4-ish turns. So I like the versatility of them. I like that you can ally them into Easterlings without bringing the king. And I'm a huge fan of the king, to be honest, but I just think the king is a little pricey and you can get other big heroes instead. The king, of course, can strike up unlike them, but just unnamed heroes at 5/5, I love. I've talked about the Corsair captain that I like. And if you put him on a chariot, it makes him even better. So that's my pick and stuff. And then again, too, knowing my criteria is aesthetic, lore, playstyle. I'm not just purely looking at the numbers to see what's just completely competitive. Though I have made these competitive. So I hope that answers. Now Matt disagree.
I completely disagree.
Okay. There we go. All right. So my second list is the Easterlings. Our second faction is the Easterlings. I think Matt hit it on the nail with playstyle with all of the tools that they have, including the drum. For me, I just love their history in the Lord of the Rings. I love that they've always been that kind of knife in the side of Gondor. They're always sacking Osgiliath or sacking Rovanian or doing those type of crazy things. Their armor, in my opinion, is amazing looking. I like that What a Workshop really put detail into giving them kind of like an Eastern feel, whilst also giving them kind of a dragon feel, which is what they are and where they're coming from. I'm a huge fan of the bronze as well. And I just think the play style is so cool. I mean, Matt and I have been like praying and begging Games Workshop to make them competitive for years. And now that they have, like, Lord have mercy, these guys look like a fun time to play. So that's where I have them. If I talked about their play style, I'd be just repeating what Matt said, but that's my number 2. And number 1 is actually Harad. So I choose this for a few reasons. Number 1, to say this competitively, I do not think they're the best, because if you play them pure, you have to have someone like Soladan be your leader. And I'm not a fan of making one fate low defense person your leader, because you can wound it, then get wounded. He also has the banner. It's like putting all the eggs in one basket. That said, they were the first faction I played, and I won Nova with them. And I just think like there's a special area there for me. The aesthetic, I love their aesthetic, to be honest. Like, I think it's a cool. We ripped on the ruffians for a bit, just being a whole bunch of civilians. I think Harad makes a good looking army because it's not uniform, but it looks really cool, and you can tell they all belong to the same faction. Their play style too, you just have so many options. You can bring Abrakan Guard for the heavy infantry killing things. You can bring cheap Serpent Riders for the, again, killing power with a lance. Fight 4. The Fight 4 across the board is pretty cheap to bring. You can play the Betrayer and just shoot the crap out of your opponent. I don't really like that playstyle too much with the new edition, but yeah, they're just fun. They have all these named heroes you can bring. You can ally them in with Mordor, with Corsairs, which is my favorite thing, to ally them with Corsairs. Bring Dalmir, who's a better leader. Some more Corsairs who kind of even buff up the horde and stuff. So that's my choice for them. They're just so much fun to have, versatile. And out of the majority of my play style and what I enjoy, I like having a really big strength, but I do, as a player, like having a weakness of the army. And Harad has that weakness, which is their armor.
All right. No surprises there.
no surprises that you guys are like, yeah, we know this. We know this. Even the
Yeah.
viewers are like, okay, good. Good thing you brought he has the last chance. Okay, he's talking. Okay, I'm gonna leave now.
All right. Well, yeah, so I guess that's our top three. And I guess we'll talk to folks in another week or so. And I guess we can leave you with one parting note of pedantry. And that's for all of our listeners out there. Unique is not a qualifiable adjective. There's either one of them or there isn't. So good night, everybody.
I'm sorry that he's like this, by the way. We tried to raise him well. We tried to raise him with respect. But sometimes your kids they just don't succeed.
Sometimes the inner lawyer just comes out.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. Bye-bye.